Hello, welcome to Free Bible Commentary with Pastor Teacher Dr. Bob Utley. Be sure to visit Free Bible Commentary at www.freebiblecommentary.org. Now, here's Bob.
I guess of all the love chapters in the Bible, this is it. The love chapter it's called, 1 Corinthians 13. It's not by accident that it's aureoled between the two passages on spiritual gifts. Last lesson I told you I would bring some books that I thought might be helpful. I'd like to show you if I could at this time. The first one is a book that I have really enjoyed called The Gifts and the Spirit by McGorman. This book deals with it's an exegesis on a practical level of 1 Corinthians 12 through 14, and it is a balance between the two negative extremes. It's all the devil and it's all of God. This is a very helpful book on getting the balance. This book by Hendrikus Berkhoff is the best book on the doctrine of the Holy Spirit I've ever read. It challenged me. It blessed my heart. It's a paperback, The Doctrine of the Holy Spirit by Hendrikus Berkhoff, put out by John Knox Press. If you're interested in discussion of the Holy Spirit and His gifts, this book will be a great blessing to your life. Now, this is an old classical favorite, The Holy Spirit and His Gifts by Oswald Sanders, but it's a good book. You'll like it. These three paperback books, I think, will give you a perspective on the Holy Spirit and His gifts that has tremendous balance in our day, and I hope you'll get these books and look at them. I'd like to go to a full-page graphic, if I could, for the outline of 1 Corinthians. Notice, I think there are three basic sections of this chapter 13. The necessity of love as a motive for exercising spiritual gifts, verses 1 through 3. The character of love is expressed in relationships with people, verses 4 through 7. And the ultimacy of love is a characteristic of God's family, verses 8 through 13. Let's begin the text, if we could then. And I think the last verse of chapter 12 goes with this. But you must earnestly continue to cultivate your higher spiritual gifts. And the implication is that he's using love as the highest spiritual gift. And yet I will show you a way that is far better. If I could speak with the languages of men and of angels too. Now, the if here is a third-class conditional, and in verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3, they're all third-class potential action. Now, the word here for the languages of men and angels is an obvious reference to the idea of speaking in tongues. What Paul's saying is, if I had the mastery of all known languages on earth and all languages in heaven. The rabbi said angels only speak Hebrew. I sure hope the rabbis are wrong. If I had the mastery of human speech and angelic speech, and I have no love, he's going to say it's really nothing. Now, this idea of love, if you want a definitive passage on what love is, you ought to see 1 John 4, 7 through 21. Now, there are several words in Greek for love. There is the word eros, which means sensual love. There is the word phileo, which means brotherly love. There's the word storge, that means family love. And there's the word agape. Now, agape was not commonly used in Paul's day. The verb was used rarely in the classics, but not very much. It's the New Testament writers took the noun form of agapao and filled it with new meaning. I think it's analogous to the Old Testament term hesed, which means God's covenant, no strings attached loyalty. I think in the New Testament it means God's selfless, sacrificial, giving love irregardless of the worth or merit of the object. We see that so fully in Jesus Christ. And all the way through here, that's the word used, agape. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, chapters 12, 13, and 14 are a series of spiritual tests. Chapter 12, it's the test, is it Christocentric? Chapter 13 is the test, is it motivated by love? Because there's no doubt the Corinthians had the evidence of spiritual gifts. But what they lacked was the motive of selfless, sacrificial, no-strings-attached love in the exercise of those spiritual gifts. So Paul is trying to put some bounds on spiritual gifts. Let's see. The next little phrase, I am only a rattling pan and a clashing cymbal. Now, I am is perfect tense. You were in the past, you remain. Now, the idea here of a rattling pan, it is true that the cults of Dionysus and Cybele clash cymbals to get the attention of their deity or to scare off the demonic. But I think here what we're talking about is a fanfare of trumpets. These people were so proud of their spiritual gifts, they wanted everyone to see. So it'd be kind of like having a trumpet volunteer and them walk on stage and do their miraculous thing, or their spiritual gift. And I think that's what it's referring to here. So I would call it really, I am only a fanfare of brass and a climactic cymbal. Something like that. Okay? Verse 2. And if I should have the gift of prophecy. Now, there are prophets from the New Testament, Agabus and Acts, who foretell the future. But basically, prophecy is proclaiming truth, not foretelling the future, although both are involved. In 1 Corinthians, I think there are both elements of prediction and proclamation, with proclamation probably being the priority. And know all secret truths and knowledge in its every form. Now, boy, I want to tell you, these Corinthians had a hang-up about knowledge. Paul's saying they had a hang-up about tongues. Paul's saying if I had all languages and I had all knowledge, I knew all secrets, I knew all knowledge in its every form, I could prophesy and know the future. If I had every bit of knowledge was in me, and I don't have love, it's not of God. Boy. And I have such faith that I could move mountains. Now, this is obviously miracle-working faith. You might want to see Matthew 17:20 about where Jesus talks about moving mountains. That seems to be the idea here. But have no love, I am nothing. You all see Matthew 7:21 through 23, where there were some people who kept saying, Lord, Lord, to Jesus. They were great preachers. They were healers. They were miracle workers. But Jesus said, I never knew you. Friends, it's possible to have all the accoutrements of Christianity and not have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It's possible to have a successful, miracle-oriented power ministry and not be a Christian. Friends, in Matthew 24:24, it says in the last day are going to come false prophets who are going to do signs and wonders and lead even the elect astray if possible. Friends, don't you believe that miracles are automatically the domain of God. They are not. The evil ones also active in that area. You can speak in tongues. You can have all knowledge. You can have power. You can have miracles and still not be vitally connected with God. I use this passage a lot to get on the case of Orthodox Christians. I guess some of the grumpiest, most unloving, judgmental rednecks I ever met claim to be Orthodox Christians. I want to tell you, you can be absolutely orthodox, absolutely conservative, absolutely theologically accurate, and if your life is not motivated by love, friend, I want to tell you, you're out of the will of God. Love is the only characteristic, the only indispensable characteristic of the people of God in spiritual gifts. You're not going to heaven by your theology, nor are the amount or the abundance of rules that you keep. But love is a sure sign that you've met the Master. It's the family characteristic of God. Now, then it says, verse 3, if, third-class conditional, potential action, if I should dole out, now this word dole out means to give out little by little, aorist tense, give everything I have once and for all. Now, you probably have, if I have for charity, that's not in the best manuscripts. I think it's in King James. King James has to feed the poor, but it's just not in the best manuscripts. If you have a problem with me axing up your King James Bible, I wish you'd send for my tape on textual criticism. Don't be ignorant. Don't love the Lord with ignorance. Love Him with truth. And we don't have to be afraid of truth. And I think if you'll send for that tape, you'll see there's some other Greek manuscripts that are much better than the manuscripts that King James was based on. All they had in 1611 was the Byzantine family, Codex Bizet, D. Since then, we've found much more ancient manuscripts. The Chester Beatty Papyri, the Bodmer Papyri, Alexandrinus, Vaticanus, Sinaiticus are much better texts. Even they disagree. So be careful in that your love for God doesn't translate to a love for a book. We love the book, but the book is not the goal. The book is a means to the goal. And the goal is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, notice then it says, and give my body up to torture and mere boasting pride. Now, this idea about torture and mere boasting pride, some of you probably have to be burned. Let me show you what. In mere boast, that I may glory or boast, is in the Chester Beatty Papyri. It's in Alexandrinus, Vaticanus, and Sinaiticus, the four major 2nd and 3rd and 4th century witnesses of the Greek New Testament. The word burned is in C, D, G, and another form in K. I think we don't know of anybody who was burned at this point, unless it's an allusion back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Daniel 3. But I think it should be glory, because what the problem here is, they were glorying, they were boasting in their spiritual gifts. They would do an act that seemed to be religious, but inside they were doing it for personal gain and personal glory. And that's what Paul seems to be attacking here, is outwardly loving or outwardly doing religious things so that we can manipulate people so we'll feel better, or we'll get what we want, or we'll feel more spiritual. God help us. Many times our love has strings attached, and many times our love is manipulative. Now, but have no love, I get no good of it at all. Matter of fact, I would add, if we are falsely loving people just to make ourselves look better and feel better, not only does that do us any good, it builds a barrier between us and God. You know what the most horrendous sin of the church is? Self-righteous sufficiency and pride. Verse 4 down through 7 is a word picture of what agape love really is. It's a word picture of Jesus Christ. But hopefully the more we come to know Him and walk in His likeness, these will characterize the life of the church and individual Christians. Love is patient. And this is a word that means patience with people, not patience with circumstances. Now, you and I, if we painted the garage floor and got trapped in the corner where we couldn't get out till it dried, that'd be patience in English. That's not what we're talking about in Greek. This is an active, voluntary patience with people. Now, I'm sure no one ever gets on your nerves. I'm sure no one just bugs you to death. But friends, the very ones that get on your nerves, the very ones that God's testing you with to see what you're really like. Friends, you're not who you are with people you get along with and feel comfortable with. You are who you really are when you get tired or under pressure or with people you don't feel so comfortable with. Then it says, it is kind, and I would say kind to all. It's so easy for us to be kind to people who are like us. Smell like us, talk like us, act like us, dress like us, eat like us, smell like us. But friends, love is kind to everybody. This in-group, out-group sociological pressure is of the devil. Love embraces all men, for Christ died for all men, especially those of the household of faith. Kind to all, not just those who are like us. Love never boils with jealousy. This green grass syndrome is the pits. We always said, if I had that church, if I just had that Bible teacher's knowledge, if I just had that car or that house or that spouse, if I just had their body, if I just... No, friend, you'd blow it. If you can't handle what you've got, you can't handle what someone else has got. This desire for more at any cost is the plague of fallen man. Now, then it says... it never boasts. This is the word for flaunt itself. It never puffs itself up is the next one, which is the idea, never boasts. It is never puffed up with pride. This is a present middle. It never continues to puff up itself. When you glory, what do you glory in? Who you are, who Christ is in your life. Bragging and pride have no place in the Christian life because, friends, we remember the hole that God dug us out of. The paganism, the shame, the rebellion, the lostness, the brokenness. There's no room for pride in our lives. Anything we have because God gave it to us. Then it continues. It is never provoked. Now, I like the Williams translation here. It says, it is not touchy. Have you ever met a touchy Christian? Well, you didn't thank me last week, and I just did this for the church, and nobody thanked me. Well, you haven't been to see me, and I had an ingrown toenail for 3 days, and you didn't come. Oh, God help us. There are emotional chips on Christian shoulders. They're just waiting for someone to knock off. Friends, love makes us not touchy. We tend to forgive instead of being so sensitive. So sensitive. Don't be so sensitive. It's just not in the will of God for us to take ourselves so seriously. You ain't that hot. You just ain't that hot. Quit taking yourself so seriously. By the way, this word for provoked, this is the very same word that's used in Acts 15:39 and Acts 17:16 for when Paul got so mad at Barnabas over John Mark. You think Paul's saying something about himself? We make these biblical characters bigger in life. Paul got so mad at Barnabas over John Mark, they had to split the missionary team. The Bible tactfully says a great contention arose. Well, they had a knockdown, drag-out emotional brawl over John Mark, and Paul wouldn't give in. Barnabas wouldn't get in. They split the mission team. Tactful, huh? It never harbors evil thoughts. And this is an accounting word that means to write something down on the ledger of accounts due. I've known people like that. They'd get hurt some way or something happened and they'd say, well, I can't get you now, but I want you to know, friend, someday, somewhere, some way, I'm going to get you. I've written it down and I'm going to get you. Love never writes down what is due. It never seeks revenge. In love, it erases for Jesus' sake. The next word here, verse 6, is never glad when wrong is done. Now, this has three possible deals. Do you like it when people you don't like get caught in something? Why is it we're always so happy when the Russians have a problem? You know? Why is it when that person that's got the promotion that we should have got doesn't make it, we go, ha, 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 ha. Love never is glad when wrong is done. It doesn't talk about others even when it knows the truth. And it doesn't compare ourselves with other people to make ourselves look better. See 2 Corinthians 10:12. Love does not easily expose. Now the next word, 7, it bears up under anything. The word bears here is the Greek word for roof. It means to cover. This is where Moffat translates so to expose. You all see 1 Peter 4:8. Then it says, exercise faith in everything. It thinks the best. It keeps up hope in everything. It expects the best from our brothers. It gives us power to endure anything. This word to endure means to voluntarily get under a load and carry that load. There's no more need. It means seeing a problem in the church and just taking care of the problem ourselves as long as there's a problem. Now, in verse 8 and following, many people have used verse 8 to say that tongues is not in our day. Now, friends, I want to admit to you there is a play on words here. There is a word that's used in verse 8. Set aside twice. It's used in verse 10 once. It's used in verse 11 once. And there's a play on that word through here. Now when it says tongues will cease, it's a different word. And many folks have said, aha, there's a different word for prophecy and knowledge and a separate word for tongues. So that means tongues is going to pass away. And it already has. Friends, your presuppositions will interpret the Bible if you're not careful. We all wear glasses of our childhood, of our denomination, of our parental upbringing, of our experiences. We must take them off when we come to the Bible. Let the Bible speak to us. The context demands that we're not talking about tongues ceasing before prophecy. We're talking about the fact that every spiritual gift is going to cease and love's still going to be on center stage. We're not picking one over the other. The context demands all spiritual gifts are going to pass away except love. That's what it's talking about. Love never fails. This is a beautiful little Greek word for fails. It's the idea of rose petals falling off a rose blossom. It's the idea of an actor being hissed off the stage. Love is never hissed off the stage. Love's petals never fall, even in winter. If there are prophecies, they will be set aside. If now there exists a static speaking, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will soon be set aside. Now I'm really wondering as I go through here, I wonder if Paul's trying to put some categories on spiritual gifts. In verses 1 through 3, he seems to list some categories. Here in verse 8, he seems to list some categories. Power gifts, administrative gifts, service gifts seem to be the categories, but I'm not really sure on that. Now, for what we know is incomplete, it's in part. And what we prophesy is in part. We have limited knowledge now. We do not have anything but sinful, finite knowledge is the limits. But when perfection comes, completion, fullness comes, maturity, what is imperfect will be set aside. There's that word. When I was a child, now he uses a human analogy of growth to describe maturity in the Christian faith. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I became a man, I laid aside, there's that word again, my childish ways, perfect tense, once and for all. For now I see a dim reflection. Now a little more literal Greek is a riddle. The rabbi said that God spoke to Moses in riddles, and I get that from Numbers 12:8. Maybe that's what the ideal is here, I'm not sure. In a looking glass. Now Corinth was noted for its polished metal mirrors. But the deal here is the looking glass is imperfect. Have you ever been to a house of mirrors where the mirror is imperfect and it makes you all kind of distorted? Well, that's what those best mirrors of Paul's day distorted people's features, even the most expensive ones. And so what he's saying is we look in the mirror right in this life and it's distorted. We can't clearly see. But there's coming a day when we will clearly see. Now, but then we shall see face to face. We'll see things as they really are. And now I know what I know is imperfect. This is the word gnosis. You all see 2 Corinthians 3:7. But then I shall fully know, epigenosko, full and complete knowledge. You all see 1 John 3:2. It does not yet appear what we shall be. But we know when we see Him, we'll be like Him. There's fullness. There's completeness. As God knows me. Now by these three. Faith, hope, and love endure. Now the word endure is singular. It's like it's one rope with three strands, but the major strand is love. And the greatest of these is love. Paul uses a little triad of faith, hope, and love so often in his writings. It kind of summarizes the Christian life. Romans 5:2-5, Galatians 5:5 and 6, Colossians 1:4 and 5, 1 Thessalonians 1:3, 5:8, Hebrews 6:10-12, 1 Peter 1:21 and 22 summarizes the places that Paul uses those little triads together. Next week we're going to be in chapter 14, which is going to bring the concluding balance of the excess at the Corinthian church. Remember, 12-14 is the fullest discussion of spiritual gifts that we have in the whole Bible, but it's in the context of error, abuse of freedom, unlove, and selfish pride. So we must interpret in light of that. And be careful not to draw universal principles from everything Paul says, because a lot that he says is what's inappropriate. I've enjoyed being with you. I'll see you again next week.